Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast about music, education, and technology. I'm your host, Robbie Burns.
So, my life hack for this is to, even for things that I don't think require calendar invites, to send calendar invites.
Yeah.
Because if you send a calendar invite, it will always go on their calendar in their local time zone.
You know what? You are correct, because computers, this is a problem that computers have solved. I think it, and this is, I believe, resolved at this point. Long ago, I would sometimes get a weird behavior if the recipient's email was a different domain than mine. Like if somebody invited me from their Gmail, weird stuff would happen if I tried to put the event in my iCloud.
Were you doing
calendar.
it from like an iCal file?
Maybe I did something technically wrong. Like what would happen if I invite here? I'm going to do it right now.
Do it right now.
Invite you. Yeah, we'll see what's happening. I should probably call it though. Let's see, METT record, and then I'm gonna. Now for me, this is 4. So I think the whole point is I'm supposed to put it just like I normally would, and then I double click it. I go to invite ATEEZ, and then, yeah, okay, so this, first of all, hinges on me having your contact. So, my contact email for you is your first, middle, last name at gmail.com.
Correct.
So I just sent it. Now, I don't know what would happen if I sent it to, is that email, does it need to be the email that you would get an email notification in, or the email that is associated with whatever calendaring service you use?
It should work with any email address that can receive email.
Okay.
And what will happen though is, because I am in Fantastical, I will get a Fantastical notification that I was invited to this thing, and it will show up directly there. But if I didn't have that set up in Fantastical and you just sent it to me as an email, it would still show up in my email inbox, and it would say, well, let me see. Let me make it. No, please check the emails. I haven't gotten your email yet, which is weird.
No, let's see. I have a little alarm icon in the upper left. See, should we just go chaos order? Because I have a handful of grab bag news topics, but calendar applications and productivity is on the outline today, and I am using Apple Calendar right now, which might shock you.
It doesn't shock me. It's a very good calendar app. I think, honestly, I do, as much as I love Fantastical, I feel like there are fewer reasons for me to use it every year, because Apple Calendar continues to be good and get nice, especially since, and this has been several years now, that they've added a natural language calendar entry thing, which was always Fantastical's big selling point. I think Fantastical's is still a little bit better in my experience, and it also has little kind of power usery keywords. So if you know for sure that you want the event to be added to a particular calendar, if you put / and then start typing the calendar name, that will automatically tell it that you want that to go in your. So I should say, if this is the show, I should explain what this is. So natural language calendar entries are, if I wanted to invite Robbie to lunch on Tuesday next week, if I just said lunch with Robbie Burns at 1 p.m. next Tuesday and typed that sentence exactly into a magic box on the Fantastical application, it would figure out what date next Tuesday was. It would figure out who Robbie was. It would put that on my calendar for that time. It would default to whatever my default duration is. I think it's probably an hour for lunch. And if I didn't tell it what time, it would guess what time lunch should be. It would probably guess noon for lunchtime. And if I wanted to say lunch at Panera, it would automatically add that as the location and not in the title of the event. And if Robbie's in my contacts, it would ask me if I wanted to invite him to the meeting. And so it would do all this stuff automatically, which is really, really slick. And if I wanted to add that to a particular calendar, and if you're a calendar power user, you might have more than one calendar. I suspect a lot of normal people just put everything in whatever the default calendar is in whatever calendaring service they use. But I have like a personal calendar and a work calendar, and then I follow other calendars. So like I subscribe to the calendars that have like the games of the sports teams that I follow, and so they will show up on one version of my calendar. So there's a bunch of calendars like that, and because I have all those calendars, there's a bunch of extra cool features that Fantastical has, like the one that I mentioned earlier. If I want to put it on my Wichita State University calendar, I can type /WSU and it will know that that goes on my WSU calendar and not my personal calendar, because there are times when I don't want to see work stuff and there are times when I don't want to see personal stuff when I'm looking at my calendar events. And so that's a really useful thing. Speaking of seeing some stuff and not other stuff, sometimes when I'm looking at my calendar, another really great feature that Fantastical has that I don't think is the sort of thing that would ever come to Apple Calendar is that you can easily switch between which calendars are currently visible. So if I'm like working, and in fact, most of the time, my like default calendars that I want to see, I don't want to see, when the St. Louis Blues are playing most of the time. Like that doesn't matter to me. Or I used to subscribe when I lived in Orlando to a calendar that would tell me where my favorite food trucks were going to be that day. And so I don't like want to see that the food truck is going to be at the mall for 4 hours on Monday afternoon. Like I'm not, that's going to look confusing to me in the calendar. So I have this calendar set that's just me. It's called the name of the calendar set. So it doesn't include anything that's not directly related to stuff that involves me being in a place, and then I have some other things that I can see. So if I want to see like, I don't know, my parents' travel schedule, they have a calendar and I can look at their calendar. And if I want to see where my partner is on campus in classes, I can look and see what's going on there. But most of the time I just want to see where I'm obligated to be, and I can easily switch using these calendar sets, which is pretty cool in Fantastical. But so tell me about your move to Apple Calendar.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't introduce the topic, but I think our primary thing we were gonna gather today.
Yeah, you can move things in order. How much do you edit this anymore?
How much do I edit it
anymore? Is this more like a live to tape kind of situation?
Oh, I do like some. It depends. How much of the like filler words I edit out is dependent on mood and time these days.
Fair.
But, so I mean, yeah, so it's been a little while since my recording schedule and publishing schedule has gone real wild. So I actually, right before this one releases, there will be an episode. Everyone should check it out. So a little seasonally late, but Craig McClellan and I talked all about the Apple Developer Conference keynote that happened last month, and some thoughts on future updates coming to Apple software. So, but because it's just been so long since I've recorded an episode, there's been like some news and some mini topics I've just been sort of building up in this note that you're a perfect person to kind of go through with. But we'll just do that later in the outline, because the main thing that we had joked earlier it was either one or two times ago that you were on, was we were complaining about Microsoft Teams and and it just came. I think you joked that we should just do like therapy for software, like all the issues we've been having with our computers. We should just like get it all out there. And I would like to put a slightly positive spin on it and say, like, where am I finding other solutions are working around?
It's about our feelings about software.
That's right.
And I think we have feelings about software. I was telling this to somebody else recently, and it seems like a weird thing to say, but I am a fan of software. I think it's really cool. I think people who make it are very clever. I think it's the thing that excites me the most about computers. I know there are a lot of other people who get excited about hardware things or AI things or other robotics or whatever. But I think like software is the thing that gets me excited about computers. I have feelings and opinions.
I have feelings too. And I consider software art, like a good piece of software. Someone who is usually something to me that feels handcrafted and where attention is put into every detail of the experience. And I think that's valuable, and I think that's often overlooked. And I know for the entirety of my life using a computer, but especially now, there's always some sort of reason for somebody to aim in the middle, like not sort of tailor a piece of software towards a particular kind of person or a particular type of task, or design it for a particular type of platform or operating system. These days, it seems like web technologies like you've got to have your app available on Chrome OS and like on the web browser so that anybody can use it anywhere. And so we see a lot of apps that are using, stuff like I'm blanking on the word. What's Obsidian made with?
Electron.
Thank you, Electron. So there's like all of these things, and and Apple has like Swift UI and like Catalyst. They have a couple of ways that somebody can get an app on all of Apple's platforms, and I think like there's if something is in my workflow, if I'm using it at all, my optimist take is like I'm going to reserve the right to complain about it all day long, but it's probably serving me in a way where it's like better than not having the software.
Yeah.
But there are these apps that do delight me when I use them, and I feel like every part of the interface is exactly tailored towards making my brain move forward with the task at hand. And so I like all of as much of my software as can be to adhere to that kind of model or workflow. So yeah, so calendars. I mean, calendars are on the list because there's a couple of productivity apps where I have kind of reverted from what I would call the fussy, complex power tool over the past year. We'll say like since September. I've like pivoted away from a couple of those and towards simpler things that maybe just work.
Can you give me an example other than calendar?
Yeah, I can give you two other examples other than calendar. So the main other two productivity tools, I guess you could say like also, I'm going to leave out of the equation for a second email, but tasks and notes are two really big types of platforms I spend my time in. And I'm often wrestling so much with them that I'm using more than one of each of these types of classes of notes. And I still am for tasks. So I use a little bit of Apple Reminders. I use a little bit of the Do app. But I've switched most of my task workflow from OmniFocus to Things since September. And I think I said this last time with Craig, but I'll say it again. Like a lot of these really, really powerful apps that can be fully customizable usually out of the box do about 60 to 70% of what I want, or work 60 to 70% of the way my brain works. And then you can endlessly tweak them. But when I endlessly tweak them, I usually get them to 80%. But there's usually like a much simpler, nicer app that is like 85 to 90%, but I can't do anything to make the experience more me. It's opinionated. And I guess that's an aspect also of thinking of software as art, is like somebody had to make a choice.
Yeah.
To design it a certain way. And that means that I have no autonomy over how I interact with it. Like for OmniFocus, I had some plugins that were solving like weird quirks of the app. But like now that I'm using Things, I don't have to solve any of those problems. But it's also missing like 2 or 3 things that OmniFocus could do that I'm just sort of living without.
Right. What's the thing that OmniFocus could do that you're living without?
It handles repeat tasks way better, and it also has like you can give a due time for something. Like
that's true.
The actual, and those have become pretty important to my workflow. Also, the handling of nested tasks was a little bit more. You could control it better, but see, Things would show it to you better. So like in OmniFocus, every type of task is pretty much equally treated. Even a project heading is sort of just a task under the hood.
Right.
Like they all have the same properties. So OmniFocus would do silly things. Like if I had a task and then a bunch of subtasks, it would like sort them sometimes like in reverse order with like the order of how it thought I wanted to like maybe do them, or the order that they were like technically due based on the time in the properties of each task. But like really when somebody has a list and they have a task and subtasks, they just really want to see all of the subtasks embedded and indented underneath of the primary task. Like this is how most people want to see it. But OmniFocus would like show me the primary task at the end, because technically it's not done until all of the other subsequent tasks are done, and it was showing them to me in order of how they should be done. But that was just not how I wanted to see them represented visually. And I would like tweak it and do all sorts of fiddly stuff to try to get that to be good. And they've improved it a lot over the years. But I think the final thing that broke me on both this and on Notes was that a lot of these powerful apps are so great on the Mac and really draggy and slow on mobile. And I was just getting so tired of the slow syncing speed to my phone. And I'm using my phone a lot this year. I really like my new iPhone, and I'm using it so much more than ever before. And so whenever I would like go to drag and drop a task or open the app and just like be staring at it, waiting for it, I was like, this is not how someone with my kind of, like, that's just not going to work for my brain. I will literally forget what task I'm entering by the time I'm waiting for the drag gesture to animate.
Right.
So So that's where I've landed in Apple Notes too. I mean, I'm still using Obsidian for the daily note feature, but Apple Notes is just more transparent. So like I don't have to, if I drag an image into it, I don't really have as much control over what I can do with that image, but that image is always going to be there. It's not in some folder somewhere else on my computer where if the connection to that folder breaks, I don't see the image, I see text. Like it's just, everything is what you see is what you get. And
how do you sync your Obsidian vaults?
I was using Obsidian Sync because it was faster and more reliable than iCloud, but now that I'm mostly in Apple Notes, I'm switching back to iCloud.
Okay.
Because I'm not using it much on mobile. It's pretty much just, for me, the daily note feature is really awesome to have on my Mac to like have sort of a lesson plan inside of each, or just like a to-do list of stuff I want to make sure I tell my students each day of the week or do in class.
Mm-hmm. Because I use Obsidian Sync and I find it to be pretty rock solid and really fast.
It's okay. The mobile app for me still would load fairly slow, and it's also just like really ugly and clunky. Like I would always be getting lost in the mobile app in a way that I would never feel lost on the Mac version.
Yeah, I do find it's extremely unintuitive, and I have to remember how to do it pretty regularly to switch from just a list of my notes to a search of my notes in Obsidian.
Yeah, and search is not something like I would always feel like search in Obsidian was very powerful, but not like I was having to install plugins to make it work the way I wanted to. And with Apple Notes, I usually just get it on the first try.
Right. I think there's enough stuff that I need something more than Apple Notes for, and that I really like having everything in text files just generally. It makes it a lot easier to like organize the attachments that are in my notes. And since they're all in a folder in Obsidian, that's really nice. But I totally get why it's a lot of overhead. I've not actually spent a ton of time. I don't have a ton of plugins in Obsidian. I'm running a pretty simple Obsidian setup, so it's not doing a lot of stuff for me right now, and I like that. I think the way people go wrong in adopting Obsidian is to spend too much time tweaking it, because I think then it gets kind of fragile too. If something changes and your plugins don't all make the change, that can get pretty scary and dicey. But I feel like the way I'm using Obsidian is pretty stock-ish.
Something I wanted to make sure of when I made these switches was that my end result was using less or the same amount of different apps that I'm already using in my workflow. So I do still use Obsidian. I was already using it. It's not like I'm using less or more note apps. I'm just using Obsidian for less because it is a great text editing tool, and I still very much have a need for text files to live on my computer.
Right.
And I do like to on occasion edit them in Obsidian. So it didn't really change other than like the miscellaneous type of notes. There's a couple things that I think of all the Apple productivity apps, Apple Notes does the most unique stuff with the system that other apps can't really do. Like that gesture on the iPad where you like touch the screen or swipe the Apple Pencil up from the lower right corner and then you just get a little quick note. I use that a lot, and then it actually can search my handwritten Apple Pencil handwriting. So that's something I've started to use quite a lot. And I used to like get all those little scrappy notes would get lost, but since I'm using Apple Notes more primarily, I'm able to sort of see them more transparently and like kind of delete them as needed and filter through them and remember them. So
that makes sense. Cool, and it's certainly a lot faster and gonna always be reliable on whatever Apple device you're using. I don't know, how often do you find yourself ever having to reference your notes on anything other than an Apple device? Is that a situation that would never arise?
Yeah, really, it doesn't. I'm trying to think of
that's cool.
years.
That's fine. Yeah. I have plenty of things that are Mac and iPhone only. That's fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I think if I needed to use like a PC or something, I would probably have to rethink a lot of my workflow. Like I'd probably be using Dropbox.
Yeah.
Still, you still use Dropbox.
Yeah,
right?
I use Dropbox. I'm pretty happy with Dropbox. It hasn't bit me in any of the ways that I it does get a little annoying. It's a little thirsty on upsells over the last few years. It's gotten thirstier on upsells over the last few years. Like they want to, automatically back up all of your photos. They want to sync your desktop like iCloud does, and your documents folder like iCloud does, and they want to what are some other crazy things they want to do? They really want you to know about Dropbox for Business. It's a little bit like the Evernote. Have you tried WorkChat kind of situation over at Dropbox?
Gosh, I forgot about WorkChat. Oh no, is WorkChat? I thought WorkChat was an Evernote feature at one point.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and that's what I did I say that? I thought it was reminding me of Dropbox is reminding me of Evernote and the WorkChat feature. And I don't know. I'm happy with using Dropbox the way I use it now, which is just a magic syncing folder of files, and I don't really need to do much else with it. I do really like the system integrations with the Dropbox client, that I can just like right click any file, and it has a bunch of Finder extensions that will automatically create the share link for anything that's there, or it will automatically do the sharing interface right there in a Finder window. There's a bunch of things that you can do right there from Finder, which I really like. I almost never have to go to the Dropbox website, and I think I pretty much just use Dropbox from Finder, which is great.
Yeah, it's better at that than Google Drive is, but since I'm so steeped in Google Drive for work,
right,
that's kind of become my alternative tool for this. And I do, it's a little clunky in the Finder, but it does have that same right click thing. I just find that the share settings are sometimes, like there's times where I share something with someone over Google Drive, and I have no idea why they can't see it.
Right.
I have to like go digging through the share preferences for every single thing. But that's in part because there are lots of fiddly options, which are helpful sometimes for work environments.
Yeah. I mean, that's the case with OneDrive as well, where it's a Microsoft shop at my university, and so there's a lot of stuff that's like that, where I can share it very easily with other people that have a wichita.edu account, but not very easily with anyone else. So it's a real pain with that stuff.
I will say though that like that aspect of my workflow, like iCloud Drive has improved quite a lot over the years, and I think they're finally allowing you on all platforms this fall to choose files and just say, like, on a per file basis, do not throw this in the cloud. Like, under no circumstances are you allowed to take this file, see that my hard disk is filling up, and then like throw it into iCloud and make me have to click that little cloud icon. So that's about the last remaining frustration I had. I actually, on my ancient iPad, I still, am pretty impressed that I can now sync a Logic Pro file from the desktop of my Mac to the iPad.
How ancient are we talking? 2018?
Oh, I mean, ancient, yeah.
Okay.
Should we talk iPads real quick? Are we that bouncy?
We can if you want to. I'm just curious. I didn't know if you had upgraded your iPad at all. Are you going to wait?
No, I did. I'm going to wait. I'm going to try to wait a year. I do think that some of that intelligence stuff coming out is going to, but it's probably, I don't know. I mean, who knows when the next iPad will come out. If there is a new one next spring, it'll probably coincide with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Being out there. So the iPad remains pretty, it's like mostly a work device. Like I use it a lot less in the summer when I'm not reading sheet music.
Mm-hmm.
Although it is a great Elden Ring companion. On the couch.
Are you're doing Elden Ring with like a guide on the iPad or something?
Yeah, for me that game is like, I don't care about the spoilers at all. I just have the whole like interactive map open with like where all the bosses are, because there's like new Elden Ring content that was.
Oh yeah, of course, naturally.
Released at the beginning of summer.
I didn't do this with. I'm not an Elden Ring kind of gamer, but I did that a lot with Tears of the Kingdom last summer. So had a guide app for Tears of the Kingdom, and was having that available while I was doing that stuff.
And I would like to be nice to the iPad a little bit, because sometimes I'm mean to the iPad, and I'm like, hey, it looks like a Mac when it's docked to the keyboard, but it doesn't do half the stuff. But I will say that sometimes I'll catch myself in bed with the iPad Pro attached to the keyboard on my chest or my lap, and I'll never do that with the Mac. And so there's something to that device where it's just like a little friendlier of adapting to other play. So it's not just like the Mac when it's docked. It's somehow better to hold, to lug around. Maybe it's not as bottom heavy and stable, but the iPad is nice, and it's gonna happen eventually for me.
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of your other what are some of your softwares that you have feels about?
Okay, well, we talked about how Microsoft is terrible the last time
You
we
know,
were on.
I will say one thing that I have recently discovered about Teams. So I'm trying to be a better team player. And I still think it's terrible. I still hate it. I still think it's really poorly designed and implemented on the Mac in particular. I'm sure it's better on Windows. I have discovered that there is a way that you can, in the files area of a given team, you can say that you want to sync this folder or this whole files chunk to your computer locally. And so I can then work on some shared projects with people in my area at the university. So, for example, I'm the graduate coordinator in the School of Music, and one of my projects every year is to get together all of the graduate teaching assistants that people want. Well, not to get the teaching assistants together, but to get the nominations for graduate teaching assistants from the teachers who are hiring them, and then send out offer letters to these graduate students to be grad assistants. And I need to coordinate that with the chair of the department and sometimes with people in the larger College of Fine Arts office, and a bunch of other stuff is connected to that. And it's something you want to make sure that you get right. You know, like accidentally offers somebody a bunch of money that shouldn't get the money. So anyway, that's all in an Excel spreadsheet that's in a Teams folder. But I told Teams that I want to sync that folder locally. And so now I can work on that project without opening Teams. I just open the folder in Finder and then double click that spreadsheet file, and it opens directly in Excel. So if you are currently, like me, struggling through using Teams and you don't like using Teams, there are some ways that you can use it a little bit less. So there are two things that I would encourage anyone who's in this situation to do. One is, in your Teams settings, you can tell Teams that anytime you double click a file in Teams, you don't want it to open in the weird web view version of Word or Excel or PowerPoint or whatever you're working on. You can say, open this in the actual application, because I have got Word installed on my computer. So don't open it inside a web view, inside a web view, inside a web view of the Teams app, which is what it will do by default, right? So Teams is its own weird web view that uses way too much memory and really hammers your battery life on a laptop, just like a lot of other poorly written web apps like this do. And it will open inside of that a web view that has the web version of a Word doc in it, which is terrible. It's just a horrible way to work. I'm sorry if you like working that way. You're just wrong. And so if I go into the Files app now, or the Files area of Teams now, and double click an Excel spreadsheet, it will not open it in that weird web view. It will open it in actual Excel. If Excel's not running, it will launch it just like if I double clicked the file in Finder. So if I go to if you go to your team settings, you can tell it that you want to always open files in the local app. So if you go to settings, files and links, file open preference, always open Word, PowerPoint, and Excel files in. And your options are Teams, desktop app, and browser. Just change it to desktop app and you'll be a lot happier. The other thing that I do, I mentioned this a moment ago, is if I go to the Files tab, there is a button, at least for me, at the top, and I'm in New Teams, whatever that means. And there is a button that says Sync. And so I can sync those files to my computer. And that may open a thing that will redirect you to OneDrive to make sure that there's something that you need to okay for that. But it will then use the OneDrive app, which is just like Dropbox or Google Drive or any other sync thing that you have set up. and it will just show up as a place in Finder. It's on the left side under locations for me, and I have OneDrive shared locations, and I now just have this school music administrative team folder that I can just open up that file and work on it anytime I want, and it's really great. So
I do feel like Microsoft understands and people are trained to use apps. Like everybody can relate to the idea of like Microsoft Word is installed on my hard drive and I can double click an icon to launch it. Like people get that idea, and I feel like Microsoft is also the closest. Apple is actually doing a pretty good job, I think, with the collaborative iWork documents. This idea that like sharing the thing means it can still like you can still launch an awesome responsive app on your computer rather than going to a tab of a website. And I'm kind of lost. I mean, I would love for Google to make some decent, even just like okay Mac apps where you can kind of do that thing where you like tell Chrome or Safari to like make a web app that has an icon. It's just really actually going to launch it in your web browser. You know what I'm talking about? What's that called? Where your like browser can kind of make a website into an app.
A progressive web app?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But because that remains sort of a frustration organizationally for me. I kind of conceive of files to be still on the computer. They're in the computer. But Google, not having apps on the Mac is a deterrent. But yes, I think Microsoft, how close are they on their dream? Because I know like 4 or 5 years ago, they said, hey, we're going to make all of the features of our apps into web bits that where you can sort of like interchange them. So like you can have a blank canvas that you just sort of put a little bit of a spreadsheet in, a little bit of a to-do list. You can embed several cells of an Excel spreadsheet into an email, and someone can edit it in place right from within their reply to the email. Like, has that happened yet?
I don't know, man.
Teams?
That's a line. So I will say the one Microsoft thing, and this is the thing that always kind of messes me up when I'm working with colleagues. The main Microsoft app that I don't like using and try to avoid using as often as possible is Outlook, which I'm sure is central to a lot of that kind of collaborative stuff. I would imagine maybe Teams is kind of is that thing where you can put a thing in a thing. Maybe that's what Microsoft Loop is trying to do. I don't know if you've used Loop for anything. It's their block-based editing
is it out of beta
thing. I think it is, but if you've got an institutional access to Microsoft Office, you may need to have your administrator okay your access to it.
That's how it was about a year ago.
I think it's still that way. It is. I having used it only very briefly, it is fine. That's what I have to say about Microsoft Loop. It's better than OneDrive, or it's better than OneNote, which is terrible. I don't understand why people like OneNote. If you do like OneNote, I'm sorry, that's just another thing you're wrong about. I'm being really spicy today.
That's fair.
I
know
summer.
There are like 11 people who love OneNote. They're very passionate.
I know
about
some
OneNote.
people that I work with who swear by OneNote, and I don't understand those people. So
yeah, can I complain about a couple more Apple apps though? Since I praised their
yes,
notes,
please.
Reminders, and calendar. Safari profile. I just want to every time they do the conference, the developer conference, and they say new features come into Safari, I think I want to use Safari. I like Safari, but the way it handles tab groups and user profiles is weird. Like I don't want to have launch a whole separate window to switch my tab group profile. Like if I want to go from personal to work, and it's the one thing, like you can do a focus mode and have it show you tabs based on where you are. So like when I get to work, different notifications go through to my phone and different apps show up on my home screens. And supposedly my tabs will just switch over to my work tabs, but they never do. For some reason, the Safari never works. And I think it's because because I don't have a window open, like permanently open. That is, you know what I mean? Like I think it wants to like open a new window to do that, but it can't for some reason. I'm not really sure. If you understand this and can explain it to me, please say so. Because the one reason I continue to need Chrome, not want Chrome, but need it, is Soundtrap. And I'm very sad to say that our school district is not funding Soundtrap next year, so I don't know yet what I'm doing for
No.
my digital audio workstation for my music class.
Yeah.
But like I would love to use Safari. One thing I do miss though in Chrome, which is changing in the updates this fall, is that you will be able to use Apple Pay inside of third-party browsers.
Nice.
And I really miss that. So I will use Chrome if I have to and be slightly happier with Apple Pay. And I will enjoy its better tab management. But I would love to know how to get Safari, because I feel like in order to manage the Safari tab groups, I first of all need to have the sidebar open, and I don't want to have my tabs on the left. I want them to be like, to look like, files, like folders up at the top. But yeah, so if anyone out there or you knows how to make this work better, I would be very grateful.
I have been kind of dabbling in Arc over the last year or two, and it does that. So your different, I forget what Arc calls them, but they're basically, they're kind of a combination of tab groups, but also they can have different like login cookies associated with them too. So you can like, if you've got 2 Google accounts or 2 Apple accounts or 2 Microsoft accounts or whatever, like a personal and a work account, you can have different accounts assigned in different, I think they call them spaces or profiles or something like that. And so you can do that. And then you can have a series of tabs that are in each of those, and those tabs can each have their own like home page, which is really cool. So I do most of my university stuff in Arc for a number of reasons. There's a couple of web applications that the university uses that really, really, really prefer the Chromium Blink engine. They don't seem to care that I'm not using Chrome proper, but they sometimes get a little nasty. My main browser otherwise is Firefox, and they're not wild about Firefox sometimes, but they're happy to use this thing. The other thing I really like about Arc is on the desktop, when you're using it, it doesn't show any browser Chrome at all. So you don't see your tabs, you don't see your plugins, you don't see anything at all. You have to hover over the left edge of the window for those to come up. And that's really great, because I feel like when I'm demonstrating stuff in class or on a video or something for my students, I don't want them to like get distracted by like looking at the stuff that I have bookmarked in my bookmarks tab, or my bookmarks bar, or rather, that I would normally use in Firefox. So that's really nice. But anyway, so I have tabs that are saved in Arc in my WSU space that are the home pages of each Blackboard course that I'm currently teaching. And so when I open up that tab, I can go to not the home page that I have set up for Arc, but the homepage for that tab, and it will be the homepage of that course. And so I just switch those out at the beginning of every semester for the homepages of the new course. And there's a few other things that I have bookmarked that it's really useful to give an independent homepage to each tab within each space. There's a bunch of other things that Arc does, and most of them I don't touch at all. One of the limiting factors for me for experimenting with browsers for a long time was that I found that there were not a ton of plugins that I really relied on, but there were enough that annoyed me to not have. And for a while, it was one of the reasons why I wasn't using Safari, because Safari plugins were so few and far between. There's a lot more now than there were a few years ago when they changed how plugins are developed for Safari. But so you can use any standard Chrome plugin inside of Arc, and I think you can even use other kinds of plugins as well. I'm not sure, but you can just when you install extensions to Arc, it gives you the option to just look through anything in the Chrome App Store, which is pretty cool. So there's a bunch of things like that that I really like about Arc. It's not perfect, but I like it a lot, and it might do the sorts of things that you're needing to do at the expense of not being Safari, which I know is important because that's super fast and super light.
That's one of the things I really do like about it. I do like the design of it. Arc and I had a really good run this year. I'd used it for a couple of months in a row. It ultimately didn't stick because of a couple of those things that I liked about the design. Also, just I never really made habits of understanding my browser in that way.
Yeah.
I did love though how seamlessly it just got up and running. If you had if you import your Chrome bookmarks and extensions into it, they just work, and it was pretty cool. And even their iOS app, the one that is just like does basic searching stuff, they have a really. Have you used the iOS
I have not.
app? They've got the iPhone app is really cool. It's
I've heard
designed
that.
around. Yeah, it's cool. It's designed around the idea that usually when you open the web browser, you're not sort of like leaving tabs open and organizing them, and you're usually just trying to search for a thing.
That's
And so
interesting.
they have really thought about how do we make this optimized for getting you the answer you want on the internet quick. And so it's to the point where like the keyboard pops up every time you launch it. Like it just immediately has an active search window. It also does some stuff that some people have mixed feelings about with AI. Like it offers you these summaries, which I think you can do in the desktop version now. But you can basically say, hey, whatever I'm searching for, just summarize the internet on this topic for me, and it'll give you like a really nicely formatted page with like sometimes images and key areas. Every now and then I use it. It's very all of my. Okay, I'll just bring it back to Elden Ring. Every now and then I'll be like, where is Commander Gaius? AI button, and then it's just like, you need to go to this place and this place. You can start from this location on the map, and then it like gives you citations and everything to like launch you out to the
Nice.
places on the web they found it. So kind of an interesting little app, pretty cool.
I'll have to check that out. I have not spent a lot of time with it, mostly because I've never had a great experience with third-party browsers on iOS or iPad, and so it kind of scared me off of them. Like I have Chrome on my iPhone and I have Firefox on my iPhone, but it's just never great.
I would really be compelled by some of these if they put more. And I know that the reason that Google Chrome, like that they don't put a lot of investment into it, is because it can't run the actual same engine that it does on desktop. Like it has to run WebKit underneath the hood. But I do wish that they would try it, like, because one of the things I really like about the desktop is just those like tab organization features, like color coding your tab groups and things. And none of that is on the iOS version, but it could be. There's no reason they couldn't add that little bit of UI.
Yeah.
All right. Well, web browsers. Apple Music is also terrible. Can I complain about that for a hot
hit
second?
me with your Apple Music complaints. What are your Apple Music complaints?
I think it's better on mobile, and I don't understand that. Like, as a music teacher, music is just as much like a music app is a utility, not just like a thing to run your party mix. Don't get me wrong, I love to run a party mix, but I do it at home from my iPhone, and I AirPlay it out too. By the way, AirPlay is still bad and terrible too, even on the iOS.
I still
18 beta.
love my AirPlay experiences are great.
Well, I've got a lot of speakers and stuff. They're mixed brands. I think the main thing for me is like the interface though is just sometimes unreliable. Like, and it's weird to get to. But I guess we have a couple of Sonos speakers in the house, and they just did a redesign of their app. Speaking of software therapy, it's like the most universally hated app update of any app I've ever used, like widely by the whole community. Like when I go to my Reddit homepage, I'm subscribed to their subreddit. Every other post I see in my timeline is somebody's open letter to the CEO of Sonos complaining about how that app is not only ugly and terrible, like the least egregious part of it is that it's hideous and unintuitive. But that would be alone bad enough reason. But they've like kind of like wrecked a lot of people's smart home speaker setups.
I've heard about this.
Yeah, it's really bad. So I guess like this is kind of a hard problem to solve, but I would love for iOS to just give me some sort of view that can pop up easily, maybe from Control Center, that has a left column of inputs and a right column of outputs. And the left column is like some system options and some apps. And I can say, if you're the music app, you go to this speaker or this group of speakers. If you're the ringtone, you go to the phone speaker. If you're whatever, and just like, someone on Twitter a couple of years ago, kind of I think it was as a joke, but they posted kind of like do you remember how Reason used to have that like UI where you would like hit the tab key and then you would see like everything, all of the... Yeah, and you could click and drag the wiring of the synthesizers around. Like it was, they did something like that slid up from the bottom of the iOS, like kind of old Control Center. How if you like dragged up somewhere from the bottom, and it was just exactly this idea, but it had cute little like wiring things. I wouldn't need that bit. I know Apple would never do that in 2024, but like, I don't know. This to me seems like it could just be better than AirPlay, which to me is like I go to the control center. I have to tap the music part area of control center, and then a thing pops up, and then I have to tap AirPlay options. But then usually, like, what's playing in the house is not coming from my phone and sending to the speakers. It's usually coming from straight from the internet to a HomePod, and that is sending out. So, and it almost like it'll stick on my lock screen as the music playback controls for a while, but eventually it will forget and then go back to the iPhone, whatever is the iPhone output, which will be nothing. I will be playing nothing on my iPhone. So I'll go to control the music and it'll say like, it'll just show me a play button with whatever I most recently listened to on my iPhone. And then I have to go to the control center again, find the thing. Then I have to click the control other speakers in the house. Then I have to find the right speaker group, make that my source, and then it will stick for a little while. But then it won't. But this is all not even to complain about the Mac version, which is so clunky and slow that when I want to find songs to play for my band students now, I just search YouTube.
Yep.
It's so much faster. Why is that faster?
Yeah. It does. It's very unintuitive in a lot of different ways. I like finding a specific song is weird. I don't know why this is the case, but it always launches in the mini player for me on my laptop these days, and I can't get the mini player window to go away, even when I open the main window. And yeah, it's very strange. It's still. It's weird how far behind like Spotify it is, and I still pay for both Apple Music and Spotify. I use Spotify in my teaching quite a bit because that's the one that my students have, and most of my students don't have Apple Music subscriptions, but they almost all have Spotify subscriptions. And so if I want to make a playlist for them that we share, so like for a student that's in composition lessons with me, I'll have a shared playlist that's just me and that student, and we can both add stuff to that playlist. If I want to assign them a listening, I'll put it there. If they want me to hear something that they're using as a model, they can put it on the playlist. And we use that pretty extensively. So it's a little bit. And I know Apple Music now does have collaborative playlists, but that still requires everybody to have Apple Music and use Apple Music, which my students mostly don't. I've been using Apple Music more and more for my personal listening, and I find that to be actually like kind of a useful distinction for me, is to have my like recreational listening, or at least my personal listening, even if it's my professional listening for me, happening in Apple Music, and the listening that I do for teaching happens in Spotify. And when I play stuff in class, it's often, not always, but often in Spotify, or as you say, sometimes YouTube, because the other cool thing that YouTube has is just, a bunch of people's performances of stuff, a lot of times stuff that's not recorded or doesn't have a great recent recording, you can find on YouTube. So, yeah, I'm not always wild about Apple Music either, but I do, I do find myself using it more and more in spite of that, and just getting angry.
I like that idea, though. Well, here's the reason. So, and there's a million reasons I do use Apple Music over Spotify, but I will say this is a problem that Spotify has demonstrated can be solved. And the way it works is Spotify doesn't say, hey, you have a device that's playing music, and then you have speakers that music is coming out of. Instead, they say, the music is always on the internet, streaming from the internet. Just tell us which speakers you want it to come out of. And anything you register with Spotify, you could have I think even the PlayStation can output your Spotify stream. You just basically say, where's the music coming from? Any of my home speakers will show up as an option there. And what's cool about it is that because Spotify is running on the iPhone, it always sticks to the lock screen, because it's using the native playback controls that show up all the time. So it shows up as if it's the phone's audio, but really what's happening is I've told it what speakers to output to.
Right. Craft we are using right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna also, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna delete a couple off the list here.
Yeah.
Unless you really want to talk about printers, home automation, or anything. I think we both use Craft.
I almost never use it anymore, actually. Most of my Craft got taken over by Obsidian during my frustration with Craft. It's gotten a lot better recently with the one-on-one or individual note sharing is way better. So I don't have to worry about shared workspaces anymore for working on a single project with a single person. And so I think I still don't need Craft for most of the things that I do. I still kind of like it for its ability to make a quick little public-facing web page, but I can also do that with Obsidian now, and Obsidian Publish, and that's, I think, a pretty good compromise there. But for the way that I use notes, I think Craft is not as good a fit as Obsidian, and I think it is still really good for the things that it does. I'm really glad that the collaboration in it is easier and better now. So it used to be, if you wanted to collaborate in Craft, you had to create a completely separate workspace, and you were limited to a certain number of these collaborative workspaces, and you had to invite people individually to your collaborative workspace and then create notes only in that workspace to collaborate with, which is fine, except if you're like Robbie and you're using Craft to make an outline for a podcast with a guest, you'd have to create a new workspace for each guest that would have just one note in it, which is really annoying. And now you can share just the way you would share with stuff on Google Docs or something like that. You can take one individual note and share it with whoever you want to collaborate with. And that's actually, I think, pretty nice and pretty cool. And it's now cross-platform. When I first started using it, there was no Windows app, and then there was a Windows app that was in beta. And now it's pretty cross-platform. The web version of Craft is pretty solid now for people that are even on a Chromebook or a tablet that's not going to install software anyway, or if you're on a managed device and you just need to not be able to install stuff but still need to be able to access Craft notes. There's a bunch of cool stuff that you can do through Craft that I think is pretty neat. They have like a lot of applications kind of gotten kind of big as an indie app, and then they take a lot of venture capital, and then they try to pivot to, selling to enterprise customers instead of individual customers, and that creates a lot of misaligned incentives between the people that like the thing and got excited about the thing and helped make it big, and the way the company now needs to continue to make money and grow for investors. Those are very different and often conflicting sets of features that those users are looking for, the individual private users and the enterprise users. So I think they've kind of, the pendulum swung really hard, really quickly. And I think a lot of people, including myself, got pretty upset with the company and its priorities in that immediate aftermath. But I think it has swung back a little bit in the other direction. I still have some frustrations with it. It still doesn't export Markdown bulleted lists correctly. Never has in the 5 years that it has done so. And I've reported this bug. They've acknowledged that the bug exists, and they just don't care to fix it.
Well, and they also several years ago were going to do an extension.
The extension system, yeah.
Obsidian, and then they just sort of basically bailed on it. It doesn't seem at this point like they're focused on it at all. Here's my question, and I will say Craft did swing the pendulum hard, and I got really turned off to it. They have walked it back maybe 50% in terms of like the design issues I have with it. Like they've definitely improved it to a point where it feels usable again, and they've made a couple of notable improvements. Like you said, you can now have a note that you have, and it is actually, the sharing privileges are easier to manage than a Google Doc. So like me, sharing this note with you for this recording was very, very simple. And actually, just if you didn't even have it installed or use Craft on any devices, it would have just opened on the web. You would have been able to edit it without creating an account or without any fiddling.
Which is great if you're collaborating with somebody who's just like not that technically inclined and would not get excited about installing a new piece of software on there. Like Robbie and I, if you said, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you on this thing," and to do so you have to download this app, we'd be like, "Heck yeah, let's get a new app," right? But
right.
Like that's not a normal reaction to that request, I don't think, and I think we can both acknowledge that. So it's really nice for a time when I want to collaborate with somebody who I know is less of a fan of software as I am, that I can just say, here's a link, open it and go to town, and it's pretty self-explanatory what you can do. The other thing is, because that's not so open-ended, like a Word doc or even a Google Doc, you can't mess it up too bad. Like people that like would change all of my fonts or whatever, or not use, like the one of my big pet peeves when I'm collaborating with somebody in a Word doc is when I want to use the styles system and say that this is heading 1 and heading 2 and heading 1 and heading 2 and heading 3. Like they just want to like make it bigger and just remember in their head that all of these are bold and 20 point, and these are not bold and underlined and 16 point, and then the regular type is 12. Like that's nonsense. You can't do that stuff in Craft, and that's really nice to me. But anyway, I think Craft is starting to head back in the right direction, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I get that feeling too. It's usable to me. And that feature where you can like just easily share something with someone is definitely what's held me to it. I share notes with a lot of my private students where I log all their weekly assignments and goals for the week, and that's been a tremendously useful thing for them. I edit it as easily as I would edit an Apple Note, but then they have a bookmarked little mini website on their devices where, and it's kind of nice too, because I'll notice like that if for a couple of weeks pass and I don't see a lot of progress, and then I just take not like the main note with all the like dates, because what it is it's the student's name in the note, and then like just every date we meet is its own kind of sub note that they can tap or click on. Sometimes I'll take just the note of the day that we met if someone's like maybe not hustling, and I'll share it with the parent, and then they'll be like, oh, thank you so much, wow, this is so detailed, you've been doing this every week. And I'm like, yeah. And it's really partly for me too, because if I have like, I have a lot of like students right now between the 5th and the 7th grade, and a lot of them are in really similar parts of a few method books that I use frequently. And if someone, I would like to be able to better keep track of like who is on lesson 10 or 11, or even specific things. Sometimes if it's feeling stagnant, I can say, hey, you've been on this exercise for 3 or 4 weeks. Like this should have taken you 1 week. Or I can say like, practice it at 80 beats per minute specifically. And then that's just like really detailed data that doesn't really take a lot of effort for me. Sometimes I feel a little bit like, do you know how like the doctor types a lot when you're in your appointment? I try to not be that like that, but I do try to take some light notes that give them some rich detail. And Craft is good at that. Can Obsidian Publish now take a single note and share that to the web and then give you a URL, or do you still need to publish a network, like a mini website, in order to get your stuff?
You can publish an
that's how it was.
individual note. It's a little tedious. It's not as automated as Craft. That's the main reason I don't use it that same way in Obsidian. You have to manually publish each note, and then you have to manually update each published note. So if you want the published website to be updated, you have to like kind of do the publish thing again. It will not, like with Craft, as soon as you type a new thing, it's fixed everywhere. It's changed everywhere. And Obsidian is just not as frictionless in the way that it manages your published notes. Craft is just better at that. And I think Obsidian published website web pages look okay, but I think Craft published pages look really slick.
Yeah, they do look really nice. Yeah, someone asked me, I'm doing a D&D campaign right now, and I have a pretty rich backstory for my character that the DM wanted access to. And he was like, share a Google Doc. And I was like, wait a second, I don't have to do that. I can put this in Craft, and it was so much easier to do.
That's what I did the same thing also for a D&D campaign. I made a really extensive backstory for a character, and the DM asked me to share it, and it was in Craft already, and I just shared it with him.
Yeah, and that was nice. So my pitch is better than Google Docs.
Yeah.
It'll solve a lot of the same problems for, less effort.
And I think it's cool you can actually have both, right? So now that we have the ability to collaborate on an individual note and also publish the individual note, like if you and a co-teacher wanted to have the editing privileges on some policy document or something like that, or an assignment document or something like that, that you could then collaborate on editing it with your co-teacher and then publish it to students who would not be able to edit it. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've said it before, but it's worth sharing in case no one's heard it before. Our whole, all of our information for our music program is now in Craft, and it's shared with students through our learning management software, and they click a link and it takes them, we call it the band wiki. And it's got the syllabus in there. And so we can just all type in, if somebody's like, oh, there's a typo in paragraph 3, like you could just fix the keystroke. You don't even need to be logged into a web browser or have an internet connection. And then when it connects, it pushes that update. And that's been really nice because, you can really easily, like you can just drag and drop media into it and format it really simply. Like we're about to change some of the method books we have our students get next year. And I know that we're just going to basically drag and drop a couple of screenshots of new book covers into that page. And it's just going to be so easy.
Yeah,
and we don't have to republish that every year like we do our Canvas page.
I have a that's a big reason why I don't use it. I used Craft as well for a long time with class stuff. Is that I would have 4 or 5 different classes that all needed exactly the same information that might change very slightly from semester to semester, and for all sorts of reasons, it was just easier to put a link into a Craft note that I would share as a link inside Blackboard. And so that made things a lot easier. I do have in my composition studio, I have a composition studio handbook, which is probably the same kind of thing as your band wiki. And I had it in Craft for a long time, and I got frustrated enough with Craft that I moved it to a GitHub Pages website. But now that Craft is better again, I'm seriously considering moving all that crap back over to Craft. I'm not sure I can trust Craft again now with all of this stuff, and it's so easy to manipulate the things on GitHub Pages. The downside is you have to like open a Git repository and edit a Markdown file and check that back into the repo to update the page. So I'm the only one that's ever going to do that. Like my co-teacher with a PhD in music theory is not going to do that. So, it's not for the faint of heart. It's for me because I'm a big nerd, but it's not for it's not even for most big nerds. That's another reason to maybe move things back into Craft, at least that one small thing back into Craft.
Yeah, it's really great for that exact kind of thing. I have more stuff, but we should probably move on to some news and many topics because I've gotten most of my passion, most of my build up over the past year. I think I've thank you for this moment of software therapy.
It's been great.
We can kind of go at these with just sort of the like, I don't know, we can get into the niche as deep as you want. I just thought I would say like anytime something has caught my eye that I haven't blogged about or talked about on the show, I just clipped it into a note and I dumped it all in here because there's just been a lot. Some of them are just little tiny things. I haven't been blogging as much this year. Maybe that's something to reflect on at a later time. But I don't know. I think the spoken word feels still like the most comfortable place to get the ideas out, where they get the most generous reads from people. Of course, then they're not just these like fixed, accessible resources online. But anyway, this would be one of the things that I may have blogged, but I think I'm just going to say it first. It's an update to the Anytune app, which I have blogged about before, but Anytune is the one for iOS and for the Mac where you drag an MP3 file into it and then you can like slow it down, speed it up, or change the pitch independently of one another and then loop an individual section. So it would be like if you were trying to, it's designed for people to like shred jazz licks over. Like if you have like 8 measures of a song you want to practice soloing over, or really not just jazz, like anything, like if you're practicing your electric guitar and you wanted to change the key to a more familiar key without changing the tempo and then loop 8 measures, you would be able to do that inside of this app. And it's for a long time been my favorite app for doing this. And what I'll often do is drag in these professional recordings of music I want my students to practice to, but then I will slow down the tempo so that they can be practicing to a really superior quality model of how they should sound, but at like 70, 80% speed where they'll eventually be. The problem with this is that I would ideally want there to be a count off. And so what I have to do is take my 70% speed recording, bring it into Logic Pro, and then record myself into the microphone, counting 1, 2, ready, go in tempo, and then edit it. It's just all these steps. Well, now Anytune has count off support built right into the app.
Nice.
So you can save a bunch of steps. And that's exactly like, I just feel like they read my mind on that one.
That's interesting. Cool. I like that. I don't use Affinity. I don't use. I jump the gun. I don't use Anytune nearly as much as you do. I mostly use it if I need to slow something down for transcription, or simplify something for a transcription. But I think this is a cool use case, and I'm glad that they're supporting it with this count-in feature.
Yeah, it's really great. It's exactly the kind of iteration that this kind of simple one-use focus kind of app needs.
Yeah.
You're really into the Affinity stuff. You always explain why people should be checking these apps out so well. Do you want to
I can
do that and then say the updates?
So Affinity is a suite of 3, I guess, graphic design, desktop publishing kinds of applications from a small, formerly independent-ish company. And it kind of has direct competitors to 3 of the big Adobe graphic design apps. So if you are an Adobe Creative Cloud aspirant or current user even, and you are a little put off by the pretty wild subscription terms that Adobe is now apparently getting in trouble about. But anyway, the very high subscription pricing, you might be interested in checking out the Affinity apps. So they have kind of one-to-one replacements for, and that's a slight exaggeration, I know, but they have really solid replacements for Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign from the Creative Cloud suite. Their Photoshop competitor is called Affinity Photo. Their Illustrator competitor is Affinity Design, and their InDesign competitor is Affinity Publisher. And they're all great. I use them, especially Design and Publisher, quite a lot for polishing up things in scores, for doing wacky graphic score things, for designing things for the web, for designing things that I'm going to use for teaching materials. I use these applications a whole lot, and I think they're really great, and they're very cheap. Even I think when they are at their normal prices, they're I should have looked this up before I started talking, I suppose. Do you know how much they cost normally?
They're always on sale.
They're on sale a lot, and they're on sale like for a lot off. So they're normally a one-time payment of $70, and I had to check because I think it went up a year or 2 ago. It used to be $50 or $60, but they're now on sale as we're recording this, 50% off. So $35 will get you the Windows or Mac OS version of one of these applications. They have iPad versions, which are very solid. Those are also on sale. They're normally like $18 or $19 or something like that. And they're currently on sale for $9.29. And you can buy the whole suite with their whole universal license system. It's really solid software. It's very well designed. It does a lot of really useful stuff around vector graphics. I prepared my my tenure portfolio last year when I applied for tenure at my university, which, if you're not familiar with how that works at the university level, you submit a huge document, and there's different systems for it. There's now online systems for doing this stuff, but we're kind of in the dark ages, and we still submit. It's only in the last like 3 or 4 years that we've submitted them as a digital file at all and not on paper. But I submitted this like 700-page document, and I prepared it in Affinity Publisher, and it was really great. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff there. Anyway, the biggest news, I would say, is they were acquired earlier this year by Canva, which is pretty cool. And
Canva is extremely popular amongst educators, and I'm sure most people listening to this have used it before and know that for really quick general web graphics design utility needs, it's a good thing to use.
And Canva is really cool because it's like good graphic design concepts on Rails, kind of, for people who are not graphic designers. It's really easy to make something that looks kind of modern and stylish in Canva, in a way that if you just open, a general graphic design application and you don't know a lot about graphic design, like principles of graphic design, it's really easy to make something that's hideous. And Canva makes it really easy to make something that looks awesome. And so that company, I think, is really interesting, purchasing these more like pro kinds of design applications from Affinity is really cool and really interesting. So that anyway, that's the biggest thing I would say. We're in version 2 of their desktop applications, which is really great. They have a lot of really cool features. The 3 applications share the same file format, which is cool. So you can open a publisher file in Designer and vice versa, which is really, really handy sometimes. And it's really easy to move data back and forth between the 3 applications. You can do pretty much everything on the iPad with all 3 of them that you can do on the desktop, which is really great. And it's really interesting that Canva has purchased them. They have made a commitment to always and forever have perpetual licensing system in the way that Canva is a subscription web-based platform. So that was a concern that a lot of people had when they first invested in Affinity, and they have committed to continuing to not subscriptionize, or at least exclusively subscriptionize these applications. I think it's going to work out well for the best. They've also committed to keeping the price for that like reasonably affordable, whatever that means. I know that's kind of fuzzy. And they've committed to keep developing it and not put it out to pasture, which is the thing that we often see with this kind of acquisition in this kind of limited space like this. And Canva's pretty cool. Canva's pretty interesting. I don't know. Have you tried any of the new Canva I don't know, doc kinds of things? Like Canva is now trying to be basically like take on Google Docs and make nice documents.
I'm curious to try some of that. I haven't. I do want to real quick. I want to talk about that, but I want to jump in and say, because I know people do care about the pricing. One additional big piece of news that's even more recent than the acquisition is that the Affinity apps, all the things you just mentioned, are now free for educators. In fact, the
webpage says it will be free soon, but it sounds like people are getting it now.
You're right. It does say soon to be.
Free,
you have to register.
Free to K-12 educators. So maybe people are getting it already. But regardless, also as we're recording this, they are doing this, I think, kind of unprecedented move of giving basically an unlimited free trial of all of their applications for 6 months. So there's no commitment to buy it. You can just download it and use it for 6 months, which is kind of wild. So I would imagine by the end of the 6 months, you will be able to register for the free license. But even if not, like it's $35 right now. So, and you don't need to be an educator to avail yourself of the 6 month free trial. So if you're listening to this and you're just like a private studio teacher or something like that, that would have an interest in these things, or, if you don't have whatever the requirements might be to meet to get this, gratis license in the future, you can do the 6 month thing right now. And even then, buying this outright is very inexpensive.
And Canva itself is also free for teachers if you log into it through an account that is a school account. Like I log into it through my work Google account credentials, and I don't really know. I know they have a lot of different subscription offerings, so I don't know if I get like 100% of everything that Canva, the company, has to offer, but I know that it is the pro version of the software on the web and does far more than what a basic account will get you.
So that's pretty cool.
I think so. I think this was something a lot of people had a concern about, and who knows, maybe this will in 7 years be on a software therapy episode if somehow Canva has managed to ruin it. But the CEO of Canva was on the Decoder podcast recently, and I haven't listened to it yet.
That recently. It's great.
Okay, that's cool. I'm going to check that out. Wasn't one of the takeaways basically that they're very committed, the whole company is very committed to just simply like saving people from the clutches of Adobe's evil pricing?
Yeah.
To me, that speaks to the possibility that the Affinity Pro apps like, Photo Designer and Publisher will remain these single one-time purchase pro apps.
I could imagine a scenario in which they launch a broad subscription that includes a lot of their offerings, including their web platform and the local apps, and maybe other apps that they're not working on yet, but might work on in the future. I know their web suite includes like tools for making quick kinds of like social media video type things. So I wonder if they would ever think about a nonlinear video editor. I know that's a huge lift and pretty different from the graphic design stuff they do now. But it's kind of the biggest thing that they don't have that Adobe does have right now as well is video editing and audio editing stuff. So I haven't spent much time with any of their new stuff. I haven't spent any time with Canva AI stuff either, which I know is another big thing in this space, and as well as Adobe Firefly, which is their AI offering. So that's another thing that might be fun to watch out for as we move forward.
So we probably should talk about how Sibelius is now available in Android and Chromebook.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I'm surprised to say that Avid has released a version of Sibelius for Android and Chromebook. To me, this is a huge move to reassert themselves in schools, where I imagine they have lost a lot of ground to Musescore over the last couple of years, especially, but maybe the last 5 or 10 years more broadly. And so that's, I think, pretty exciting. There are a lot of schools where obviously those are the computers that they have, are Chromebooks. And in my understanding is Sibelius didn't develop a web version, or Avid didn't develop a web version of Sibelius, but Chromebooks have the capacity to run some kinds of Android apps. And so these Android apps will run on a Chromebook, which is, makes them now the most widely available professional music notation application. Sorry, I'm leaving Musescore out of that. Don't at me because I'm not on social media. The team at Avid has really gone for it here. I would not imagine that the application that I mostly use to prepare scores, Dorico, is going to do this anytime soon, unless they're really feeling the crunch from Sibelius and Avid on this one. Just because I get the impression that as a company, Steinberg, who publishes Dorico and develops Dorico, is just, they've tried Android, and I don't get the impression that it went very well for them. They have a version of their digital audio workstation, Cubase, for tablets called Cubasis. Cubasis on the iPad is a very cool, very impressive digital audio workstation, and they tried to make a version of it for Android, and I obviously I'm not inside. I don't see their spreadsheets or whatever. I get the impression that it was not the most successful thing for them. That it was kind of a lot of money to develop, and they did not make a lot of money on that investment. So I would be surprised if we see something like that coming from Steinberg. But I will say, weirder things have happened. Steinberg and Avid and Musescore, actually, all three of them use a version of a cross-platform development framework called Qt. They use different versions of it, but if Sibelius was able to make Qt work on Android for them, it's, I suppose, possible that Steinberg could make a version of their software work on Android as well. It would be a lot of work, but it is at least possible.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. Are there any other like really broad strokes? You're of course a frequent, well, you're a co-host on the Scoring Notes podcast, which covers all things music notation software. Is there anything else that's happened in the past 8 or 9 months that you feel like is worth mentioning? Any big movements in that space, or any things you anticipate
I will say I continue to be sad to see the demise of Finale. It's pretty much done. Like, I think the Finale's parent company, Make Music, has decided that Finale is not a good investment for their company, and that Make Music Cloud, the artist formerly known as Smart Music, is now the way to make money moving forward. And I'm sure they're right? There's definitely going to be a lot more subscription money in subscriptions to their cloud music service than there is to Finale, which has a pretty small audience and a shrinking audience, especially now that there's more high-end competition in that space. And I feel like the corporate priorities are to maybe mostly make sure that Finale keeps running on modern platforms, but to not add any new features to it. I would be very surprised if Finale got any new features in the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's really sad, because I know a lot of people really swear by Finale and use it every day, but I don't really see that platform as having a very bright future at the moment. I think Sibelius has turned the ship around, and I was worried about Sibelius for a while as well. Yeah, I think they've turned the ship around, and they're starting to add new useful features again. They've added some remote control APIs similar to what Steinberg has had with the remote control APIs. If you use a Stream Deck to control that, that's like high-end nerd stuff that most normal people don't need. But they've also started to chip away at some of the other kind of innovative features that Steinberg created for Dorico. There's something that's a bit like the ability to condense a score. It kind of works the other way in Sibelius, which I think is actually more the way arrangers and composers think about that kind of feature, where you can have, for example, 2 bassoon players sharing a staff in the score, but have 2 separate bassoon parts that only have the notes for each of those bassoon parts that the players read. That used to be a very, very, very manual process in older versions of Finale and Sibelius and Dorico. And then Dorico created this feature called condensing that allowed that to happen in a relatively automated fashion. And now Sibelius has a thing that does that, which I think is probably their biggest feature of the last couple of years. Yeah, I think that's maybe the last thing I'll mention on that front. I'm still using Dorico. I'm still very happy in Dorico, but Sibelius is they've got more investment. They've got some. Actually, one more thing I'll say. In the last year, Avid was acquired by a private equity firm, and I feel like it's still relatively new. I think it kind of just went through officially in January of this year, and I'm not still in a position where I'm ready to make an assessment of what that has meant for Avid the company and Sibelius the product and project. We'll see what it means to the investment that they are making in software development, in marketing, and a lot of other things. I know for a while there were not a lot of investments that were happening in Sibelius and the Sibelius team, but I also know that over the last few years they have been hiring people. They have been investing in fixing things that have not worked very well with the software. They have announced for at least the 3rd or 4th time that I can remember that they are finally going to fix Avid Link and Avid licensing. Who knows if this is the magic time that it will work? But I think they have people there that can fix the problems now. It's a matter now of whether they're going to be given the freedom to solve the problems that they see that they need to solve, or whether they're going to be asked to do things that are priorities of other people at the company that are maybe a little bit further removed from users.
And then, of course, there is the news of the last several months, the acquisition of Hal Leonard,
of course,
Muse Group.
This went through, I think, at the end of last year, maybe November, and was
it that long ago?
It was a huge shock. Maybe it's more recent. Maybe it's in March, but it was a huge shock to me that Musescore was the one buying Hal Leonard. And I think that's everybody that I've talked to about this has been shocked that it was that direction and not the other direction. That Muse Group acquired Hal Leonard and not Hal Leonard acquired Muse Group. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. You can listen to an episode of the podcast, the Scoring Notes podcast of Philip Rothman and I discussing this, and we had a little bit of a therapy session talking about our feelings about that acquisition and what that meant. I will say that I was perhaps more than usually unkind toward Muse Group as I have more than usually unkind feelings toward them corporately. Not necessarily individually. They're good people at all these companies. But I think they have a pretty bad track record of the respect that they have toward other people's intellectual property, especially, and also the dark patterns of design that trap people into subscriptions that they didn't intend to purchase and that they don't actually need. So I think they've made some pretty sketchy moves as a company and as development priorities over the last few years. And for that reason and many others, I don't ask my students to use Musescore anymore. So that's a topic for another day.
For sure. I've got on here, like, I think for sure we can at some other point maybe touch base. I definitely, as you've been someone who's motivated me to rethink my grading in the last 5 or so years, I think at some point I'd like to reflect on grading practices, but I also want to move on to some brief segments. I mean, there's been a lot of, like, all of the big tech companies had their spring keynotes. There's a lot of AI stuff happening. Do you want to address any of this?
I don't have strong thoughts on the AI stuff right now. I know there's a lot of people that I respect that are super indignant about a lot of things about AI, and I don't like. I'm prepared to just sit this one out. I reserve the right to not hold a strong opinion about AI in a way that I do hold.
I didn't say you need to have a strong opinion.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. It's like, well, there's no reason why I can't spout off and share my feelings. I am fundamentally uncomfortable with getting huffy about the training data sets, the people that are upset about large language models or whatever kinds of models you want, about these AI models being trained on their data, because I think I feel like it's doing basically the same thing that I, as a human, would do, right? I listen to a bunch of music, and then I make music that is informed either intentionally or unintentionally by all of the music that I've listened to in my life. When I write a blog post or when I write an email, it is informed intentionally or unintentionally by all of the English writing that I have read in my life. And so I get that there's a scale difference, and maybe that scale difference makes a categorical difference at some point. But to me, that's not an issue. And I would also say that in general, most of the uses that people have for generative AI aren't necessarily taking away jobs from anybody else. I'm not going to hire a copy editor to proofread my bio, right? That's not, I'm not taking away a job from a copy editor when I, ask, and I have not done this, I'm just coming up with a hypothetical, when I ask an AI to, like, take a look at my bio and see if there's anything about it that could make it snappier, or more attention grabbing, or more professional sounding, or more playful sounding, or whatever it would be. I don't think I'm taking a job away from an editor. I do think that fundamentally all of the things like large language models, all of the generative AIs that I have seen do stuff, have primarily a function of creating lowest common denominator content, the most undifferentiated kind of content that you can get, because they are getting literally the average of zillions of inputs from all over the web, all over history, all over whatever their training data is. But the result is always going to be the least interesting version of whatever it is, right? Because it's the most mundane, the most common way of expressing an idea. It's never going to give you that, like, delightful surprise that a human who's, like, intentionally trying to push boundaries might do. And so for that reason, I don't think it matters that much. There's some things that I'm uncomfortable with, like, if I'm using an AI to write emails and you're using an AI to summarize my emails, then we're losing a couple of degrees of human connection, and maybe shouldn't be sending those emails. If they're emails being sent by AIs and then read by AIs on the other side, then I don't understand what we're doing here anymore. But that's something that I think we'll need to figure out after everybody's emails are being written and read by AIs.
Yeah, you're kind of describing my most middle take that I could have as well. I have some pretty big concerns that I think I'm going to leave room on this show down the road to have both and all sorts of ideas about this be shared by me and other people. But I think in short, you're right in the sense that I'm trying to think of something I've used AI for where it has stopped me from someone else from being creative or higher. Like the other day I put a keynote. I was like, I would like this keynote slide to have something on it other than text. And so I put an AI generated image in it. And I'm like, I would have never paid a graphic designer to do this. However, I would never dare make my podcast art through an AI because I've yet to see an AI produce anything artistically that isn't derivative or a joke. And sometimes things that are derivative are an important part of our culture and therefore relevant and helpful and useful to be able to generate.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I leave it for now.
I think there's a lot of very basic functional uses for AI. And forgive me if I've used this example on your podcast before, but it's one that I think about a lot, is when I'm preparing a syllabus at the beginning of the semester for my students, the thing that I'm most likely to mess up, and the thing that is most tedious, one of the many things that's very tedious about updating a syllabus or writing a syllabus the first time, is just getting the dates right. And so I can ask the robot, if I'm teaching a class that meets every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from whatever time to whatever time, I can say, dear robot, give me a list of all of the dates for every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between January 6th, 2025 and May 12th, 2025, and give it to me in this format. And I will give an example of a bulleted list. Maybe it's a markdown kind of list. Maybe it's just regular bullets, but I can ask for it in a very specific format and it will get it right because it knows how basic calendar math works. It knows if you need to figure out something with time zones, you can ask the robot, if it's 3 o'clock in Eastern Daylight Time, what time is it in Central Daylight Time or whatever like that. There's a lot of kind of functional things like that that are very calculable. Like you could figure this out in terms of another thing. You could even create a special tool. There's lots of apps that deal with time zones. There's lots of apps that deal with calendars, as we were talking about at the beginning of the program. But these are a way to do some of those things without trying to figure out what that specific tool is. This is like the big Omni tool that can just say, hey, do the thing and give me the thing. And I think those kinds of things to me are way more interesting because I don't have to go and find the tool to I have in the past toyed around with writing a JavaScript that would spit out those dates for me and figure out what days it needed to skip for holidays or whatever. But it's just way easier for me to just open chat.openai.com or whatever your large language model of choice is and ask the robot, give me these things, and it'll come back with the things. And I think those are the things that I imagine, at least in my own life, using these kinds of AIs for more than anything else.
And that's why I'm particularly excited about a lot of the Apple stuff, if it works as advertised, because it does have that utilitarian sort of personal, let me be your computer. Let me help you do the things you already are going to do, but easier.
Yeah.
All right. Quick segments?
Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned this a little earlier, but not everybody knows it, so I'd like to more fully explain that if somebody is using an iPad with an Apple Pencil and you are staring at the screen like the device is on, and you take the tip of the pencil and drag from the lower right corner of the iPad screen up and to the left, you will create a quick note where you can immediately, from anywhere in the operating system, start handwriting, and then that'll save to a little quick note area. And I use that all the time. It's fantastic. People's jaws usually drop when I show it, or they ask, how did you do that? And so here's me telling you to do that. Try that if you have an iPad.
Yeah. Let me, somewhere I have. All right. Have I talked about Velcro cable wraps on this show before?
Maybe, but go for it.
So
no, you talked about, I think, some things that you can put over lights.
Okay. Things that I can put over lights. I don't even remember what that. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. So this is, and maybe this is it would be a thing for a holiday gift guide type of situation as well. But Velcro, the 3M according to trademark law. Velcro Corporation, was has this great product that you can get. They're just cable wraps, and I use them for everything. They're stupidly cheap. They are called, let's see, VELCRO brand cable tie, reusable cable ties. I buy them literally in a subscribe and save on Amazon. I use these so often. I get a 100 pack of them at a time. I have purchased, according to my Amazon history, I've purchased the 100 pack of these 6 times because every time I see a cable that is not correctly coiled and not neatly stowed, I put one of these cable wraps on it. Even when I pull a new gizmo out of the box that has a cable, I put one of these on it. There's a lot of different ways that you could use them. I also use them as part of my cable management system for my sit-stand desk that I'm talking to you from at the moment. They come in a roll of, I think, 50 in a roll. So I keep a roll or 2 of them in my desk in my office at school, and I give them to students all the time because they're, about a dime a piece, if that. And so I give them out to everything, and I keep all of my cables really nicely organized with this thing. It allows me to just toss a bunch of cables in a bag without them getting tangled up. So anyway, if you want to talk about cable management, I can talk all day about cable management. It's one of my most fun hobbies at the moment. And these cable wraps are perhaps the front line in my war on cable mess. And they work for all kinds of things. I use them in a lot of circumstances where other people might use zip ties as well. They're going to be less good for outside things. Zip ties are still the way to go for outside things. But for inside things, these things are great because they're really easy to open up and redo in a way that zip ties aren't. So highly recommend the VELCRO brand one wrap cable ties 100 pack 8 by 1/2 inch black cord organizing strips, then pre-cut design wire management for organizing home, office, and data centers.
Amazing.
I can do that for you better if you want a better take on that. But
if we do like another like holiday gift guide thing later this year, I definitely think we should do a cable management section, just because I'm so tired of repeating the same books and like accessories of my technology. You would be appalled if you saw under my desk right now, and I think we need to at a future time we'll figure this out.
Yeah, we'll figure this out. And if you need me to a really important component of my cable wrangling over the last few years has been a 3D printer. So I've 3D printed a lot of cable design, cable organizing things as well. My current sit-stand desk is a shambles because I have just moved it, and I have not committed to this current setup to the degree that I would want to start messing with it. But I think I'm pretty close to spending a day or two getting everything back together. Because with this, it's the cable management for a sit-stand desk is very important because it's going up and down, and you don't want like stuff getting pulled off the desk when you're going up and down. So the Robbie can put the link to these in the show notes. They are currently 5% off on Amazon as I'm recording this for $10.98 for a 100 pack. So highly recommend these little guys, and I can show you how to use them because different people use them differently. I think I've got the best way to use them, but that's maybe more of a video type situation than an audio type situation.
For sure. All right. I think I've just got a couple of apps that I've said on the show recently, but I'm passionate about them. Can I reuse one two times within rapid succession?
I think that's allowed.
I think so. I don't remember if it was even like within the last 2 episodes that I mentioned one of these too, but this is just where I'm at. It's summer. I've got some they're a little bit off. They're a little bit like outside of the scope, but I know a lot of people out there count calories and like to manage their free time. Or maybe they don't like to manage their free time. Maybe they're the kind of person who wants their free time to be management free as well as just like doing different things than work. But let me tell you that I like to manage my free time because I sometimes have limited of it. And there's an app I've been using to catalog and categorize my, like whenever somebody recommends a book or a podcast or a show or a movie or a video game, I put it in the Sequel app. And it's got search and it just it uses some databases, I'm sure, that it's drawing from, where it just puts the thumbnail or the book cover or the artwork of the thing all in a nice grid view for you, and you can mark something that you're currently watching or listening to or reading, or something that's like in your backlog or something that you've finished engaging with. And it's kind of cool. I tend to think about my hobbies a lot more in my spare time, more minutes than I actually have time to engage in them, but it kind of makes it a little bit more intentional. And I think it's cool. For some, it might feel like a chore, but for me, it's a nice thing to say, like, okay, like I've only got so many hours in the day, and these are like the next 2 or 3 video games I want to play, or this is the next book I want to read.
That's pretty cool. Does it also do music?
It doesn't do. It does podcasts. Does it do music? It does audiobooks, games, movies, books, and TV series.
Because I feel like that's the other thing that I end up doing is that people recommend an artist or an album or whatever to me in exactly the same way that we are about to do. And if I was using a thing like SQL, I would want to put that kind of thing in SQL too. But that's interesting. I don't use anything like SQL. But
isn't that what that MusicBox app is like? There's like this indie app for the iPhone.
I think I have that, but I think I've ever used it.
I think the idea is that you sort of like put stuff you want to listen to in it, and then it launches it in Apple Music. But for me, I'm like, I guess if somebody recommends something to me and it is on a streaming platform, I just right away add it straight to my library, because I'm not fussy about like my library organization beyond that. Like I'll just, click the add this to my library button then and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I mentioned calorie counting, I think, a second ago. So I'll just say Foodnoms is what I'm currently using. It's really good. This is another great example of properly and helpfully implemented AI. You have this new search thing where instead of using their database of food items, instead you can just like type a bunch of, whatever kind of comes to your mind. Like sometimes I'm just thinking out loud and I'll hit the little like voice to text button and I'll just say something like earlier today. I was like 4 eggs, soy sauce, zucchini, pepper, salt, onion. I just start like saying all the ingredients, and then it has this AI thing which parses out everything separately and like proportions them what about a single serving sizes. And it's like the AI button is more generous with like typos and with phrasing of things, and it makes it so much faster to put the kind of thing into the database that otherwise might not be in the system. Like if I'm not buying, like a TV dinner is going to probably, by a name brand, is going to be in that database. But for me, if I'm cooking, it makes it a lot easier to get something in there.
Yeah, that's great. So I've got a few apps that I could mention here for my recommendation. Are you the kind of person, Robbie, who does like a daily puzzle kind of game, like a New York Times puzzles, like Wordle or whatever kinds of things? Have you ever been one of those kinds of people that does a puzzle every day?
No, maybe in the early days of the iPhone there were a couple, but they weren't like associated with a publication. They were just little.
But they're like the thing I like is it's a one thing a day kind of thing, and everybody's doing the same one, like the New York Times crossword kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't do that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I do the Wordle, and I do a handful of other things. I start every morning with this set of games from the New York Times games collection. I don't do all of them because there's a lot of them, but there's one that I've gotten into somewhat recently that was recommended to me by a librarian that I met at the Music Librarians Conference recently, Matt Dannon, who's the librarian for the Air Force ensembles in DC. And Matt recommended to me this app called Bandle. This is a thing that I think people who listen to this program might appreciate. You can play it on the web. So if you don't want to download an app, don't download an app. You can play it on the web, but they have an app as well. And it asks you to guess a song. It's mostly popular music, but it goes pretty far back. Like I think there was one of the earliest songs that I caught in there was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which is from the 30s. And you get a few hints at the top, notably the year that the song came out, the number of plays that official video has on YouTube, and what their estimation of difficulty level is for it, which has been way off for me. But you hear instead of, there was another thing kind of like this that I forget what it was called, but you would get like a 1 second clip and then a 2 second clip and then a 5 second clip and whatever of a pop song. I think that was shut down eventually. This one, you hear a like 30-ish second track that is just the drums or just the drums and bass, and then you hear like more and more layers of the song in the same way, and it's all recreated using virtual instruments, and so you won't hear literally exactly the song, which is very they do a really good job, I should say, of like capturing the like guitar sound or the drum machine sound or whatever. The point where it gets weird is the voice, because the voices are all synths, but that also prevents the voice from giving away the name of the song. So there's a lot of really cool songs in there. Like I said, I've had everything from Somewhere Over the Rainbow to the day we're recording this, it was What a Wonderful World, Louis Armstrong recording, and then like yesterday was Justin Bieber's Baby or something like that. So it's a pretty wide variety. It goes to pretty recent stuff. I've had stuff from the 2020s, and I've had stuff from, like I said, as far back as the 1930s. And it's pretty fun and pretty cool. I am terrible at it. As a professional musician, I am embarrassed at how poorly I do at this game, but it's still fun. It's called Bandle, Bandle.
You made me think of something unrelated. This is a little bit of a stretch, but it was actually, I meant to include it when we were covering like news earlier. Mm-hmm. In line with Anytune, another app that I frequently use for making practice tools and play along tracks is the Nmixx Pro app, which can separate the vocal, harmony instruments, and drums from one another. Like if you feed it an MP3, it'll separate them. Great for making a cappella vocal tracks or vocal-less tracks, like if you need a karaoke kind of a setup thing. I am pleased that Logic Pro will now do this feature. Like if you just feed Logic an MP3 and then I think you right-click it, you have to do something to the region. You basically. I was
just playing around with it today. You right-click, and under the processing options, the tool is called Stem Splitter.
I think it does a pretty good job.
I think it does a better
for
job
my
than
purposes.
Nmixx Pro for the tracks that I've tried in both places.
Yeah, and I think it separates bass from other harmony instruments too, doesn't it? Which is not something that Nmixx Pro will do, and it's. And then it's all there in the interface of Logic for like raising the volume up and down, and it doesn't quite have all those like quality of life features like exporting it at a certain BPM or like changing the key or like quickly turning it into like a karaoke track or any of that stuff. But for me, I think it's probably gonna become the tool when I need to do that to a track, that's gonna be the go-to now.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I was able to separate. Vocals, drums, bass, and other. So it's pretty useful. Yeah, I think that's like you. I think that's probably, if for no other reason than it's a tool that I'm already often using. Right, I don't often have Nmixx Pro running on my computer, but I often find myself running Logic. So I think that's one reason to use it, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For music of the week, I've got an Apple Music playlist.
Ooh.
Of pianist Hayato Sumino, and he was just coming up in my feeds. I think on TikTok actually, a couple of just like live performances that he has done came up, and I was just very compelled by his musicianship and phrasing and technique. And I was thinking, like, you know what? It's not every day that someone is playing like Rhapsody in Blue, but like in a way where it like sounds new or fresh to me. This is someone who's I'd like to check out more of their music. And so my first step into hearing more of his music was to just like go to straight to Apple Music had like a classical session with him, which is probably not the deepest cuts or where I'm going to find the stuff of his that I connect with the most, but it's a start. And so I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes.
All right. Nice. I'm going to mention an album, and I'm sure you've recorded. Have you recorded other episodes that are not out yet? I don't want to repeat stuff. Have you mentioned the new Hiatus Coyote yet?
certainly can. I haven't because it wasn't out when I last recorded.
Okay. So the new Hiatus Coyote album, Love Heart Cheat Code, is great. It is recency bias is a thing, I will admit, but it might be my favorite Hiatus Coyote right now. So it's very good. It's very good.
Of them all?
I think so. It's
Wow,
definitely near the
okay.
top. I know they release a lot of stuff, but you should definitely check out Love Heart Cheat Code. It's really good. It's really, really good.
Okay. All right. We're gonna be in the car later, and I think that's gonna be.
I can give you some other stuff that's a little bit less, like heady listening that I've been listening to a lot lately. My partner's really into K-pop.
Oh, we listened to a lot of that, and Theo loves K-pop.
Okay. Do you
ATEEZ
listen
is our family favorite.
ATEEZ? Okay.
ATEEZ, yeah.
Okay. So we listen to a lot of Stray Kids and Nmixx and Lacera in the house. Do you know Nmixx at all?
It's probably come up in an algorithmic playlist, but I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Nmixx, Nmixx, I think.
Okay.
And they have an album from I think last year that's really good. No skips K-pop. It has a stupid name because everything in K-pop has a stupid name. It's called FE304 break. And it's very good.
That's also going on the list.
And so if you want something that is more just at the fun end of the spectrum, highly recommend FE304 break. It's really, really good stuff. There's a track on there that is feels very it is very country music inspired. There's like fiddle solos in the middle of it. There's a bunch of others, and I think this is common in a lot of K-pop. It feels very like Bollywood kind of inspired. Which when I said that to my students, they didn't know what Bollywood was, which made me sad. And then the other K-pop group that we listen to a lot in this household is Stray Kids, and so they had two really great albums, two whole pretty solid albums last year. One called Rockstar and the other called 5 Star. So star involved a lot there. But anyway, definitely worth your time. And also great music videos too. That's one thing that they do very well.
That's
in
the
K-pop
thing
is they spend
Yes.
so much money on music videos in a way that
That's the draw.
Yeah.
That's why I think our son loves them. He doesn't really want to listen to it ever. He just wants to watch the music videos.
All right, I'm into that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks again for doing this.
Problem.
I'm excited to start editing it. I'll see you later.
I'll see you.
I'm Robbie Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for this episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in a podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review this show in the podcast app. It absolutely helps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word about it. You can learn more about my music and teaching career at robbieburns.com. I'm all over the internet at Robbie Burns or _Robbie Burns on most social media sites. Consider supporting me on Patreon at patreon.com/musicedtechtalk. All tiers get perks, but even the base tier gets you access to the Music Ed Tech Talk Discord community, where you can chat with other supporters and guests of the show about music, apps, pedagogy, lesson ideas, tech support, and more. It's a fun place to be, and I hope to connect with you there. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Scale Exercise Play-Along Tracks. Be sure to check it out. See you next time.